Committee. Senator, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good morning, Maria. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the debt bill, because we've got lots to talk to you about this morning. What happens to this bill, which passed in the House, when it reaches the Senate?
Well, it'll be up to Chuck Schumer whether to bring it up for a vote. I don't know if Schumer's going to or not. I got to say, I want to commend House Republicans. They have demonstrated bold leadership. They brought the conference together. It wasn't easy. There are lots of different factions. They have a very narrow majority in the House, and yet the House came together. House conservatives played an active role in drafting this bill, and this bill takes major steps to reining in spending. It takes major steps to reining in the regulations that are killing jobs across this country. It takes major steps to getting people back to work. This bill is an exercise in being responsible. And, Maria, I got to say, the contrast could not be starker. The Republicans in the House are responsible, and Joe Biden, what is he saying? He's saying, I will not talk, I will not negotiate, I will not give in on anything, anyhow, anyway. And what is happening is Joe Biden is gambling. Joe Biden needs to stop playing roulette with the American economy and with the American credit limit. What is happening here, there is one person on planet Earth that can ensure we will never, ever, ever have a default. That person's name is Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr. Why is that? Because every month, the federal government takes in more in tax revenue than we have in expenditures, which means we can always service our debt. And here's what a responsible president would say. Joe Biden would look at the TV camera and say, America will never default on our debt. We will always pay the interest on the debt. You can count on that. Yeah. But he doesn't want to say that. Why? Because he wants to fearmonger. He wants to scare the equity markets. He wants to scare the bond markets. And what he is doing right now is wildly irresponsible.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if markets start reacting, because once confidence is broken, you get in that cycle of dropping valuations in the stock market, only adding to the pressure. 70% of the people who have been polled in Fox News polls say that they're unhappy with the job Biden is doing on the economy. 70% others say that they do not want him to run for re-election. What's your take on Biden running for re-election, announcing it this week, the day after Susan Rice steps down? I found that very curious. Why did Susan Rice step down right before her boss was about to announce his re-election?
Look, I think rats are fleeing the ship. Joe Biden, you look at the little 3-minute video that he did, it obviously had to be from a teleprompter because they couldn't trust him to actually stand in front of a crowd and speak. His message, he couldn't talk about any policy because the policy has been a mess. He couldn't talk about inflation. It's been a mess. He couldn't talk about crime. He couldn't talk about immigration. He certainly couldn't talk about foreign policy. Instead, his message, finish the job. This job has been disastrous. Everything Biden has touched has gotten worse. And Maria, I've got some advice for Joe Biden on the debt ceiling. Someone he should listen to. President Biden should listen to Joe Biden. Joe Biden in 2011 was the vice president. Yeah. Republicans had taken the House. Republicans held a hard line on the debt ceiling. And Joe Biden, then vice president, went and personally negotiated the deal that became the Budget Control Act, a bill that was designed to cut over $2 trillion in our debt. It was the most significant fiscal restraint ever passed in modern times. And you know who didn't engage in this kind of irresponsible fear-mongering? Barack Obama, the president. He sent Joe in and said, let's reach a deal. Yeah. That Joe Biden from 2011 needs to come back. Not the guy they got right now locked in the basement and a White House that's being run by 25-year-old radicals who figure, heck, just let it all default. What do we care? These are little Marxists with no experience in the real world. We need to bring back the Joe Biden who's done this before, not the one who is behaving like a terrorist, which is what Biden is doing right now.
So back then, Senator Biden agreed to what he's now calling wacko ideas to cut the debt. Yeah. But what about Senate Republicans? Do you feel that Senate Republicans are united? I mean, what happens when this issue comes to the Senate and you've got to have some agreement?
Oh, listen, at some level, unfortunately, Senate Republicans are never united. There are 49 Senate Republicans and 52 points of view. That's just the nature of the Senate. That being said, I think what we ought to be doing in the Senate is we ought to be standing up and backing up the House Republicans. The House Republicans are showing leadership right now, and Senate Republicans should stand shoulder to shoulder with the House and say, Joe Biden, come to the table. Chuck Schumer has already said this bill is DOA, dead on arrival. He doesn't want to consider it. No Democrat, other than Joe Manchin, who's facing a very tough reelect and is suddenly listening to his voters, other than Joe Manchin, no Democrat has any interest in passing this bill. And I got to tell you a simple, practical reality. Biden is saying we must have a clean debt ceiling. Kevin McCarthy cannot pass a clean debt ceiling in the House. The votes are not there. Right. That's not going to happen, which means Biden is wasting everyone's time with this brinksmanship. And you know who bears a big part of the fault of that? The corrupt corporate media, because Biden is counting on, even if he fearmongers, takes us to the edge of the cliff, even if Biden drives us over the cliff like Thelma and Louise with a handkerchief on his hair, he's quite confident the media will happily blame Republicans, and it's why he's being so reckless with your economic future and with mine.
Meanwhile, activists are all over the Supreme Court right now. Let me move on to this. 3 conservative Supreme Court justices are under investigation for ethics. They are attacking Clarence Thomas. Did Clarence Thomas do something wrong?
No. You know what Justice Thomas did wrong? He's been one of the greatest Supreme Court justices ever to serve on the court. He has been a principled constitutionalist, and the left despises him. Democrats hate Justice Thomas, and they save a special degree of hate for him because he's a black man. And their view is an African American is not allowed to be a conservative, is not allowed to disagree with left-wing orthodoxy. You know, Justice Antonin Scalia, whom I knew well, was every bit as conservative as Justice Thomas. The left didn't heap that kind of contempt on Justice Scalia. Justice Thomas they view as a traitor because he is African American and he's an extraordinary justice.
How disgusting.
And listen, the quote ethics complaints they're raising, every single Supreme Court justice, all 9 of them, take trips across the country, take trips internationally that are paid for by others. Many of the liberal icons, Ruth Bader Ginsburg took over 100 trips. Stephen Breyer took over 100 trips. Sonia Sotomayor took over 100 trips. And all of the media, all the Democrats who are attacking Justice Thomas, they don't care at all. They're not looking at any of the Democrat justices. They're not looking at any other judges. This is a political smear job directed at Clarence Thomas because he is an extraordinary constitutionalist, and the left hates him for it.
More of the same. Now, meanwhile, you've got Alito, Justice Samuel Alito, saying that he knows who leaked the Dobbs draft to Politico last year. He thinks he knows who it is. Is it surprising to you that we still do not know who leaked it?
You know, it is surprising, and we need to know. The leaking of that draft was one of the greatest violations of the trust, of the integrity of the Supreme Court of the United States. It was really an assault on the rule of law. And if they think they know, the court needs to redouble the investigation. Justice Alito said he didn't have enough evidence. Here's what I believe the Chief Justice should do. I believe the Chief Justice should call in the FBI to assist with the investigation. The Marshal's Office conducted the investigation. The Marshal's Office are very good people, but they don't have the equipment, they don't have the experience in forensic investigations. The FBI does. Now, the court was reluctant to do that for separation of powers reasons. You don't generally invite another branch of government into a coordinate branch. But given the severity here, what I would encourage the Chief Justice to do is invite the FBI to work cooperatively with the marshals, get the evidence, because the individual who leaked this draft opinion should be prosecuted, should go to jail. If they're a member of the bar, they should be disbarred. And the public has a right to know who committed this enormous breach of trust.
Yeah, we'll keep a spotlight on it. Senator, it's great to have you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
Senator.